First story, by Sarah Thompson. I remember that chilling autumn evening when I realized someone was watching my every move. I was living alone in a cozy apartment in Portland, Oregon. The feeling of solitude was a comfort for me until it became a nightmare. It started with subtle signs. I'd find objects in slightly different places, like a book moved from the shelf or a chair slightly out of position. I chalked it up to a forgetful mind, but then things took a darker turn. One evening, I heard faint whispers from the hallway. At first, I thought it was just my overactive imagination, but as the nights went by, those whispers became clearer. Someone was standing just outside my door, softly muttering incomprehensible words. I mustered the courage to open the door, but no one was there. My heart raced as I scanned the empty corridor. As days turned into weeks, I noticed peculiar marks on my windowsill. Scratches that seemed to form a sinister pattern, like a message etched in the wood. Every time I glanced out of my window, a shadowy figure would vanish around a corner, as if playing a sinister game of hide and seek. One evening, I was sitting in my dimly lit living room, trying to find comfort in the glow of my laptop. I heard footsteps in the hallway. They weren't hasty or panicked, but slow and deliberate, as if someone wanted me to know they were there. My pulse quickened, and I called the police. They searched the building but found nothing. I decided it was time to install security cameras. Maybe I could capture evidence of this stalker, prove to the authorities that I wasn't paranoid. But the first night the cameras were in place, I watched the footage with growing dread. The footage showed a shadowy figure moving silently in the hallway, their face obscured by a hood. They knew about the cameras, and it felt like they were taunting me. The final straw came when I found a note slipped under my door. It read, "I watch you because you're never truly alone." The words sent shivers down my spine, and I called the police once more. They assured me they would increase their presence around my building. But the nightmare didn't end. If anything, it escalated. The stalkers seemed to become more aggressive, making their presence known with eerie noises and unsettling messages. I was plagued by sleepless nights and constant anxiety. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to move, leaving my beloved Portland apartment behind, hoping that a fresh start would put an end to my torment. As I settled into my new home, I couldn't shake the feeling that the stalker was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Second story, by David Williams. It was the summer of 2019, and I was visiting my cousin Emma in her small town of Kettering, Ohio. The quaint neighborhood and friendly locals gave me a sense of security that I soon learned was misplaced. One afternoon, Emma and I were sitting on her porch, sipping iced tea and enjoying the warm breeze. That's when I noticed a man standing at the edge of her property, staring at us intently. He was middle-aged, disheveled, and had a wild look in his eyes. I nudged Emma, and we exchanged nervous glances. Emma got up and asked the man if he needed something. He mumbled something incomprehensible and shuffled away, disappearing into the trees that bordered her yard. We dismissed it as an odd encounter with a local eccentric, but it was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, the man became a constant presence. We spotted him lurking near her property, sometimes at night, always watching us. When we confronted him, he'd either mutter nonsense or glare at us with a disturbing intensity. We grew increasingly unsettled and called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was always gone. One evening, I decided to stay over at Emma's place to keep an eye out. We had heard strange sounds outside at night, like footsteps or low whispers. Armed with our cell phones and a sense of unease, we sat in the dimly lit living room. As midnight approached, we heard a scratching sound coming from the back door. We cautiously approached, and through the glass, we saw the same man, scratching strange symbols onto the door with a knife. We rushed to call the police, and this time, they arrived quickly. The officers managed to apprehend the man, who was later identified as a local drifter with a history of mental illness. He had become fixated on Emma's house for reasons unknown. The police assured us they would take care of the situation, and we finally felt some relief. But our relief was short-lived. A few weeks later, I received a call from Emma, her voice trembling. She said she had found a letter in her mailbox. It contained a chilling message. "I'm always watching, waiting." The fear returned, and Emma's sense of safety was shattered. We had no choice but to install security cameras, and she became vigilant about her surroundings. The stalking seemed to stop, but the scars it left on us were deep, a reminder that even in the quietest of towns, there are those who watch from the shadows. Third story, by Mark Peterson. In the heart of New York City, I was pursuing my dream of becoming a successful artist. The bustling city, the crowded streets, and the anonymity of it all had always thrilled me. Little did I know that the city that never sleeps would introduce me to a nightmare of a different kind. It all began one evening as I was working late in my dimly lit studio apartment. The incessant sirens and the distant hum of the city had become the soundtrack of my life. But that night, I noticed something peculiar in the background noise, a low, rhythmic tapping. It was faint, like the sound of a finger lightly drumming on glass. I tried to ignore it, thinking it might be the neighbor's TV or music, but the tapping continued night after night, always at the same time. It was eerie, as if someone knew my schedule and was deliberately disturbing my peace. My curiosity got the better of me one evening, and I decided to investigate. I followed the sound to my bedroom window, which overlooked an alleyway. To my shock, I saw a silhouette, a figure shrouded in darkness, standing just below my window. They were tapping on the glass with their fingers, their face obscured by a hood. I shouted, demanding to know who they were and what they wanted. The figure didn't respond but slowly retreated into the shadows. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, the stalker was long gone. They assured me they would increase patrols in the area, but that did little to ease my anxiety. As days turned into weeks, the tapping continued. It became more than a disturbance, it was a torment. I couldn't focus on my art, and sleep became a rare commodity. I set up cameras in my apartment, hoping to capture evidence of this relentless stalker. One night, as I reviewed the footage, I saw the hooded figure on the screen, their face still hidden. They had somehow managed to enter my apartment. They stood by my bedside, their cold, lifeless gaze fixed on me as I slept. The realization that they had been so close filled me with dread. The police were called once again, but the figure had left no trace, and there was no sign of a break-in. My life had become a nightmarish cycle of fear and paranoia. The tapping, the intrusions, the relentless pursuit of my privacy. It was as if I had become the prey of a relentless predator in the urban jungle. I couldn't take it any longer. I left my beloved New York City and returned to the quiet embrace of my hometown. The tapping and the hooded figure haunted my dreams for years, a reminder that the city's vibrant facade concealed its dark secrets. And sometimes the most terrifying horrors were the ones lurking just beyond your window. Fourth story, by Emily Turner. Growing up in the suburbs of Chicago, I had always felt safe in my quiet neighborhood. That all changed when I started receiving strange letters. They were hand-delivered to my mailbox, and the first one read, "I know everything about you." It sent shivers down my spine. At first, I thought it was a cruel prank or a misunderstanding, but as the letters kept coming, I realized I had a stalker. Each message revealed more intimate details about my life, things only someone close to me could know. The writer had to be someone I knew, but they remained anonymous. I called the police and showed them the letters, but without any concrete evidence, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested I install security cameras, which I did. The thought that someone was watching my every move made me anxious and paranoid. The letters continued, and I grew more desperate to discover the identity of my tormentor. I became obsessed with analyzing each word, hoping to find a clue. One day, a letter arrived with a cryptic message. "I'll see you soon." It was the last straw. I decided to investigate on my own. I started to document my surroundings, noting any suspicious activity. As I pored over my footage, I spotted a figure lurking in the shadows, always at a distance. Their face was always obscured, and they moved with eerie grace. It was clear they didn't want to be identified. With the evidence in hand, I returned to the police. They launched a more thorough investigation, but the stalker remained elusive. I couldn't escape the feeling of being constantly watched, and the paranoia was driving me to the brink of madness. One night, I awoke to a loud crash. I rushed to the living room and found my front door ajar. The stalker had entered my home, leaving behind a chilling message scrawled on the wall in blood-red paint. It read, "I'm closer than you think." My life was unraveling, and I couldn't bear the constant fear anymore. I decided to move to a new city, leaving behind the familiar streets of my Chicago neighborhood. I still wonder who my stalker was and what drove them to torment me. The letters and the lingering fear will forever be a part of my past, a reminder that sometimes the danger is much closer than you think. Fifth story, by James Carter. My job as a long-haul trucker took me to various places, but one of the most eerie experiences I had was on a desolate stretch of highway in the Texas Panhandle. It was late at night, and I was the only vehicle on the road, surrounded by vast open fields and an endless sky. As I drove, I noticed a pickup truck that had been following me for miles. It kept its distance, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The driver's intent was unclear, but something about the situation felt wrong. I decided to stop at a remote rest area to see if the pickup truck would pass by, but it pulled in behind me. I felt a knot of unease in my stomach. As I stepped out of my truck, the driver of the pickup remained in their vehicle, hidden behind tinted windows. I tried to dismiss my paranoia, thinking they might be a fellow trucker who needed a break. But as I walked toward the rest area building, I heard the pickup's engine rev, and it sped off into the night. It left me with an unsettling feeling of being pursued. I continued my journey, hoping the strange encounter was behind me. However, as I reached the next town, I spotted the same pickup parked at a gas station. The driver was nowhere in sight. I approached the vehicle and saw a note on the windshield that simply read, "I know where you sleep." My heart pounded in my chest as I realized I had a stalker who was relentless and dangerously close. I called the local police, but they couldn't do much without concrete evidence of a crime. I was left to continue my route, knowing that I was being watched. The next few nights were a living nightmare. I would spot the pickup truck waiting for me at rest stops and gas stations, always parked at a distance. The driver remained elusive, never revealing their face. I couldn't take it any longer. I decided to take a detour, a route not on my usual path. It seemed to work. I lost the pickup truck. The feeling of relief was short-lived, though, as I realized I was now in a remote area with no cell phone signal. That night, I parked my truck in a secluded spot and tried to get some rest. But the engine of the pickup truck roared to life nearby, and its headlights bore down on me. I was trapped. With a pounding heart, I stepped out of my truck, and the driver of the pickup finally revealed themselves. It was a man with a twisted, manic grin. He stepped out of the vehicle and said, "You can't run from me." I bolted into the darkness, desperate to escape this relentless stalker. The man pursued me, his footsteps echoing in the eerie silence of the night. I stumbled upon a remote farmhouse, and with every ounce of strength, I banged on the door, praying for help. The door creaked open, and a terrified farmer let me in. We called the police, and they arrested the stalker, who had been driven by an irrational obsession with me. It was a chilling experience that made me realize how vulnerable we can be, even on the desolate highways of the Texas Panhandle. Sixth Story, by Mia Anderson. I had always been an avid hiker, and living in the Pacific Northwest provided me with endless opportunities to explore the rugged beauty of the Cascade Range. However, one hike in the wilderness of Mount Rainier National Park turned into a terrifying ordeal I will never forget. It was a crisp, clear day in September, and I decided to tackle the Skyline Trail, a popular but challenging route that promised breathtaking views of the surrounding mountains. As I ascended the trail, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The forest, thick with towering trees and dense undergrowth, felt like it held secrets. I tried to brush off my unease as nerves or the product of my overactive imagination. But as I reached an isolated clearing high on the mountain, I spotted a figure in the distance. It was a man, standing among the trees, his eyes fixed on me. I couldn't make out his features from that distance, but his presence was unsettling. I continued my hike, but the man remained in the periphery of my vision. He seemed to shadow my every step, always maintaining a distance, never coming close enough for me to confront him. As the hours passed, the fear grew, and I quickened my pace, desperate to escape his gaze. The sun began to dip below the horizon, and I decided to make camp for the night. I set up my tent in a secluded spot, hidden among the trees. I hoped that the stalker had lost interest, but my hope was in vain. As darkness fell, I heard rustling in the underbrush. The man had found my campsite. I didn't dare confront him. Instead, I remained inside my tent, listening to his footsteps as he circled the area. He whispered incoherent words, and the sound of his voice sent shivers down my spine. I had to escape. I waited for what felt like an eternity, and when I thought he was at a distance, I unzipped the tent and made a run for it, leaving behind my gear. The stalker pursued me through the darkness, and the forest became a labyrinth of shadows. It was a terrifying game of cat and mouse, and I had no choice but to keep running. I stumbled upon a ranger station, where I found a park ranger on duty. I told him about the stalker, and he radioed for backup. Search and rescue teams combed the area, and they managed to apprehend the man, who was later identified as a mentally unstable loner who had been living in the wilderness. The encounter left me scarred, and I realized that even the most beautiful places could harbor the darkest of secrets. It was a reminder that the wilderness, while awe-inspiring, could also be treacherous, and the line between adventure and terror was often razor-thin. Seventh Story by Laura Mitchell. I had always enjoyed the tranquility of my lakeside cabin in the Adirondacks. It was the perfect escape from the noise and chaos of the city. But during one fateful summer, my idyllic retreat turned into a waking nightmare. It all began when I noticed signs that someone had been on my property. Footprints in the mud, disturbances in the underbrush, and strange markings on the trees. At first, I thought it was just a curious hiker or a lost camper, but it soon became apparent that I had a stalker. Late one evening, I was sitting on the porch, watching the sun set over the tranquil lake, when I heard a twig snap in the nearby woods. I strained my eyes to see but couldn't make out anything in the growing darkness. The feeling of being watched was palpable. I locked the cabin doors and kept all the lights on, my heart racing. The stalker made their presence known by throwing small stones at my windows, creating an eerie symphony of clinks and clatters. I called the local sheriff's office, but the cabin's remote location made a swift response difficult. The harassment continued for weeks, escalating with each passing day. The stalker began leaving disturbing messages written in the dirt on my porch. "I see you," they'd scrawl, or "You can't hide." The constant fear and anxiety were taking a toll on my sanity. One night, I awoke to the sound of breaking glass. The stalker had thrown a rock through my bedroom window, shattering the glass and filling the room with the chill of the night. I screamed, and the shadowy figure outside retreated into the woods. The sheriff's office arrived this time, but the stalker had vanished. They assured me they would patrol the area more frequently, but the constant sense of dread remained. I couldn't shake the feeling that the stalker was always one step ahead. Determined to capture this tormentor, I set up a network of motion-activated cameras around the cabin. One night, the cameras captured a fleeting image of the stalker, their face hidden beneath a hood. The image sent a chill down my spine. The police used the image to launch a manhunt. They eventually apprehended the stalker, who turned out to be a neighbor from a nearby cabin. His obsession with me was a terrifying revelation. He had been spying on me for months, lurking in the woods, and tormenting me with his sinister messages. My lakeside retreat, once a haven of serenity, had become a battleground of fear and paranoia. The stalker's arrest brought some relief, but the scars of that traumatic summer still haunt me, a reminder that even in the most peaceful places, danger can lurk just beyond the tree line. Eighth Story by Alex Parker. Living in a small town in Georgia, I had always considered it a safe and close-knit community. However, that perception shattered when I became the target of a relentless stalker. It all began with eerie messages left on my doorstep. One chilly winter morning, I discovered a handwritten note outside my front door. It read, "I'm always nearby watching." The words sent a shiver down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being vulnerable. I showed the note to the local sheriff's office, but they couldn't do much without any concrete evidence. The notes continued, becoming more personal with each delivery. They contained details about my daily routines, my friends, and even my family. The stalker seemed to know everything about me. I became increasingly paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder. As the weeks passed, I noticed strange occurrences around my home. My belongings would go missing and reappear in odd places, like my car keys showing up in the freezer. I began to question my own sanity, wondering if I was the one behind these strange events. One night, I was awakened by a tapping on my bedroom window. I bolted upright to see a shadowy figure outside, their face hidden by a hood. They were tapping with their fingers, a sinister rhythm that sent a chill through my body. I called the police, but the stalker had vanished before they arrived. I decided to install security cameras around my property, hoping to catch a glimpse of the stalker. The footage revealed the figure, always lurking at a distance, always just out of reach. The police were no closer to identifying them, and my fear continued to grow. One evening, I was returning home from a friend's house when I noticed a figure standing in my driveway. It was the stalker, his hood pulled low to obscure his face. I confronted him, my heart pounding, and demanded to know what he wanted. He didn't answer, just stared at me with an eerie intensity. I realized that my safety was at risk, and I decided to move to a different town, hoping to leave the stalker behind. It was a difficult decision to leave my home and community, but I couldn't endure the constant fear any longer. The nightmare had taken its toll, and I was determined to start fresh. The stalker's identity remained a mystery, and I will never know what drove him to torment me. But the experience taught me that even in the most peaceful places, there can be those who lurk in the shadows, ready to disrupt your sense of security. Ninth Story, by Ethan Johnson. I had always been an avid camper, and my passion for the great outdoors had taken me to the secluded beauty of the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. However, one camping trip would become a chilling encounter with a relentless stalker. It was a crisp autumn weekend, and I decided to spend a few nights in the deep woods far from the beaten path. As I set up my camp, I noticed unusual markings on nearby trees. They appeared to be symbols etched into the bark, and I couldn't decipher their meaning. As night fell, I heard strange sounds in the distance, whispers, laughter, and footsteps that didn't belong to any known animals. The feeling of being watched became undeniable, and I retreated into my tent, my heart racing. The eerie noises continued, tormenting my sleep. The following morning, I discovered a note placed at the entrance of my tent. It read, "You can't hide from me." The message was a chilling reminder that I was not alone in the wilderness. I packed up my camp and decided to hike back to the trailhead, hoping to escape this unknown tormentor. As I made my way through the dense forest, I spotted a figure among the trees. It was a man, standing silently, his face obscured by a hood. He watched me with a sinister intensity, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in grave danger. I called the local park rangers and reported the stalker's presence, but their arrival was delayed due to the remote location. I had no choice but to continue hiking, all the while feeling the stalker's presence behind me. I reached a clearing near a small, serene lake and decided to rest. As I gazed across the water, I spotted the stalker on the opposite shore, still watching. He raised a hand in a mocking wave, sending chills down my spine. It was clear he was playing a sinister game. The park rangers finally arrived and apprehended the stalker, who turned out to be a recluse living in the woods. His obsession with me had driven him to follow my every move. It was a harrowing experience that made me realize that even the most beautiful and remote places can harbor dark secrets, and the line between adventure and terror is often razor thin. 10th Story, by Rachel Bennett. I was living in a small coastal town in California, enjoying the serene beauty of the Pacific Ocean. It was a place where everyone knew each other, or so I thought, until I discovered that I had a stalker. It all began with strange occurrences in my beachfront home. I'd returned from work to find objects slightly out of place or missing. At first, I thought it was mere forgetfulness, but it soon became evident that someone was entering my home when I wasn't there. One evening, I heard faint whispers coming from the hallway. At first, I dismissed it as the sound of the sea breeze through the windows. But the whispers grew louder, and I realized they were coming from inside my own home. I tiptoed down the hallway, my heart pounding, and discovered a shadowy figure hunched over, whispering incoherent words. I screamed, and the figure bolted out of the house, vanishing into the night. I called the police, and they conducted a search but found no trace of the intruder. I installed security cameras to monitor my home, but the feeling of being watched persisted. The stalker's intrusions escalated. He would leave eerie messages on my mirrors, scrawled in lipstick. "I'm closer than you think," one message read. It was as if he reveled in tormenting me, always one step ahead. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard a scratching sound on my bedroom window. I knew it was the stalker. I mustered the courage to look outside and spotted him, his face hidden by a hood. He was scratching strange symbols onto the glass. I decided to leave my coastal haven and move to a new town, hoping to escape the relentless stalker. But the nightmare continued. The messages, the whispers, the feeling of being watched. It was as if he had followed me. I reached out to a private investigator, desperate for help. They uncovered evidence that the stalker had a long history of harassment and had followed me from town to town. It was a chilling revelation that left me feeling trapped and vulnerable. The investigator worked closely with the police, and they finally apprehended the stalker, who turned out to be a disturbed individual fixated on me. The arrest brought some closure, but the scars of that torment still haunt me. The experience taught me that even in the most peaceful and close-knit communities, there can be those who lurk in the shadows, ready to disrupt your sense of security. Thank you for sticking with us through the whole video. Also, I recommend you this video you see on screen, one of the scariest on my channel. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. This helps me bring you more thrilling content every day. If this video sent shivers down your spine, let me know in the comments.